Before the first spin even finishes, before the lights flash, before the machine makes a single sound, most experienced players are already watching something you probably never notice. Not the jackpot, not the symbols, not the bonus. They're watching the first few spins. Because inside casinos, there's a quiet pattern that floor staff notice constantly. A small group of players will sit down, spin the machine 6, maybe 7 times, and then stand up and leave. Sometimes they win, sometimes they lose, but they never stay longer. And over time, casino employees started noticing something strange. Those players almost never fall into the long losing sessions that most gamblers experience. Not because they beat the machine, not because they discovered a secret trick, but because they understand something about how slot machines actually make money. And it has nothing to do with jackpots. Today, we're going to break down that pattern. Why some players walk away after just 7 spins, why casinos quietly rely on players doing the opposite, and why the real battle on a casino floor isn't between you and the machine, it's between discipline and exposure. The reality most players never think about. When people walk into a casino, they believe they're playing against luck. Win or lose, hot or cold, good machine or bad machine. But casinos are not built around luck. They're built around time. Slot machines are designed with one simple principle. The longer someone plays, the more predictable the outcome becomes. Every machine has something called return to player, or RTP. You'll often see numbers like 92%, 94%, sometimes 96%. At first glance, that might sound generous, but RTP does not mean what most players think it means. It doesn't mean if you put in $100, you'll get $94 back, and it definitely doesn't mean short sessions follow that percentage. RTP only stabilizes over thousands, sometimes millions of spins, which means something important. Short sessions are unpredictable. Long sessions are predictable. And predictable results are exactly where the casino wants you. The hidden metric casinos care about. Most people assume casinos focus on jackpots, but internally casinos track something else. Coin-in. Coin-in simply means the total amount of money cycled through a machine. For example, a player with $100 might spin that same $100 through the machine 50 times. Even if they only lose $40 by the end of the session, the machine may have processed thousands of dollars in wagers, and every spin carries the house edge, so the longer someone sits at the machine, the more coin-in builds. That's where the casino profit really comes from, not jackpots. Not lucky players, just repeated spins over time. Why 7 spins became a pattern? Now here's where the idea of 7 spins enters the conversation. Some experienced players follow strict micro-session rules. They sit down, they play a very small number of spins, and then they leave. The number itself varies. Some choose 5, some choose 10, but 7 appears surprisingly often. Why? Because it's specific. A vague rule like play a little is easy to break, but a rule like 7 spins exactly forces a decision point. When spin 7 finishes, the player has already planned the exit. There's no negotiation, no emotional debate, just stand up and leave. This isn't about beating the machine, it's about preventing the session from expanding, because once sessions expand, the environment begins to take over. The casino momentum loop. Casinos are designed around something psychologists call intermittent reinforcement. It's the same reward system used in mobile games and social media. Instead of predictable rewards, the machine delivers them randomly. Small wins, near misses, bonus teases, lights, sounds. Each one triggers anticipation in the brain. The result is something called the momentum loop. Spin, sound, almost win, spin again, small payout, spin again, near miss, spin again. The longer someone stays in that loop, the harder it becomes to step away. This is why most long sessions do not start intentionally. Players rarely say, "I'm going to play for 3 hours." Instead, they say, "I'll just try a few spins." And those few spins turn into hundreds. The discipline gap. This is where the 7-spin rule changes the behavior. It interrupts the momentum loop before it fully forms. 7 spins happen quickly, sometimes less than 2 minutes, before the brain becomes emotionally invested, before frustration appears, before chasing losses begins. The player simply leaves. Casinos don't lose money because of those players, but they also don't gain the exposure they rely on, which is why casino managers quietly recognize something about disciplined players. They are the hardest customers to monetize, not because they win more, but because they don't stay long enough to drift into predictable loss territory. But does 7 spins actually improve your odds? This is where we need to separate myth from reality. Leaving after 7 spins does not change the probability of the next spin. Slot machines use random number generators. Every spin is independent. The machine doesn't remember your previous results. So the 7th spin is not luckier. The 8th spin is not cursed. But the total number of spins absolutely affects your exposure to the house edge. And that exposure is what casinos depend on. What casino employees notice. Former casino workers often say something interesting. The biggest losses rarely happen at the start of a session. They happen after the player decides to recover losses. Once that decision appears, the session usually expands. Bet sizes increase. More spins happen. Emotions enter the game. And the momentum loop becomes very difficult to break. But players who leave early never enter that cycle. They leave before it starts. Which leads to a deeper question. If leaving after 7 spins helps control exposure, why do so few players actually follow the rule? And more importantly, what happens psychologically after spin number 8? Because that moment is where most gambling sessions truly begin. Because that moment, right after the 7th spin, is where most gambling sessions truly begin. Not the first spin, not the second, but the moment when the player decides not to leave. That small decision changes everything. Inside a casino, the first few spins are simply an introduction. The machine is warming up your attention. But after those early spins, something subtle begins to happen. Your brain starts building expectations. You've seen the symbols, you've heard the sounds, you've felt the rhythm of the machine. And once that rhythm starts to feel familiar, leaving suddenly feels strange. Psychologists call this commitment momentum. The longer you interact with something, the harder it becomes to stop. Casinos rely on that momentum more than anything else. Because once momentum forms, players stop making analytical decisions and start making emotional ones. The moment the session changes. Watch players on a casino floor long enough and you'll see the pattern. The first few spins are calm. The player is relaxed. They're observing. But around the 8th or 9th spin, their posture begins to change. They lean forward slightly. Their eyes narrow at the screen. Their hand moves faster toward the spin button. That shift might seem small, but to casino employees, it's a familiar signal. The session has moved from casual curiosity to engagement. And once that happens, the odds of the player leaving quickly drop dramatically. The illusion of something about to happen. One of the strongest psychological triggers inside slot machines is the feeling that a result is building. Players start noticing patterns. 2 bonus symbols appeared earlier. A near miss just happened. A small win returned part of the bet. These moments create a powerful illusion that the machine is warming up. But slot machines do not warm up. Every spin is generated by a random number generator operating thousands of times per second. The moment you press the spin button, the outcome is already determined. The machine does not build toward a jackpot. It does not remember your previous spins. It does not owe you a win. But the brain struggles to accept that level of randomness. Humans naturally search for patterns, and when we think we see one, we become reluctant to leave, because leaving feels like abandoning something that was about to happen. The near-miss trap. Casinos understand this tendency extremely well, which is why slot machines are designed to produce near misses. Two jackpot symbols appear. The third symbol slides past the line. Two bonus icons land perfectly. The third stops just above or below. Technically, these outcomes are still losses, but psychologically they feel different. A near miss activates the same areas of the brain that respond to actual rewards. It creates excitement without paying anything. And once players experience that excitement, they often feel compelled to try again. After all, the machine almost hit. Maybe the next spin will finish the pattern. But again, the machine does not remember that near miss. The next spin is completely independent. Still, the emotional pull is powerful. And this is where disciplined players behave differently. When the seventh spin finishes, they leave before those psychological triggers take hold. They step away before the brain begins constructing the story that something is about to happen. The cost of one more spin. Another reason players stay longer than intended is the idea that one more spin is harmless. After all, what difference can one spin make? But casino math operates on accumulation. One spin becomes 5, 5 spins become 20, 20 spins become 100, and with each spin, the house edge quietly applies itself again and again. For example, imagine a slot machine with a house edge of 6%. Over a few spins, that edge might not appear clearly, but over hundreds of spins, it begins to shape the outcome. That's why casinos measure performance through coin-in rather than individual wins or losses. Coin-in represents the total amount wagered across spins. Even if players win occasionally, large coin-in totals gradually tilt results toward the casino, which means every additional spin increases exposure. And exposure is where the house advantage lives. Why most players break their own rules. Many gamblers actually start their sessions with limits. They say things like, "I'll just try a few spins," or "I'll leave if I lose $50." But once they're sitting in front of the machine, those rules begin to shift. The reason is something psychologists call loss recovery instinct. When people lose money, they naturally want to recover it. That instinct can override logical planning. A player who planned to stop after losing $50 might suddenly decide to keep playing until they win something back. Unfortunately, that often leads to deeper losses. The same thing happens after wins. Instead of leaving ahead, players continue playing to see if they can win even more. In both situations, the session becomes longer, and longer sessions bring the player closer to the house edge. The discipline advantage. Players who follow strict spin limits avoid these emotional swings entirely. They treat gambling more like an experiment than a pursuit. 7 spins, no exceptions, no negotiations. Whether they win or lose, the session ends. This approach removes the two biggest drivers of extended gambling sessions, loss chasing and win chasing. Without those emotional triggers, the player never becomes fully absorbed in the momentum loop. They remain detached from the machine, and detachment makes it easier to leave. What casinos actually want? Casinos don't rely on players losing every session. They rely on players staying long enough for probability to stabilize. Over time, that stability favors the house. This is why casinos focus heavily on environment design. The lighting is soft. There are no clocks. Machines are comfortable to sit at for long periods. Every detail encourages players to stay. Even the sounds of nearby jackpots serve a purpose. Hearing someone else win suggests that big payouts are possible at any moment, which makes leaving feel premature. But disciplined players view the environment differently. They see it as part of the system designed to extend sessions, and they understand something important. The casino floor is not built to make you lose instantly. It's built to make you stay. The question most players never ask: if casinos profit from extended sessions, and if short sessions reduce exposure, then the real question isn't whether 7 spins is magical. The real question is much deeper. What actually happens mathematically when someone plays for long periods of time? At what point does randomness begin to fade and the house edge begin to dominate? Because understanding that transition is the key to understanding why casinos actually make money. At the beginning of any slot machine session, outcomes are unpredictable. A player could win on the first spin. They could trigger a bonus within minutes, or they could experience a long streak of losses. Short sessions are chaotic, random, sometimes lucky, sometimes frustrating. But the longer someone plays, the less chaotic the results become. This is where mathematics quietly takes control. The gravity of the house edge. Every slot machine is programmed with a house edge. This edge represents the percentage of total wagers the casino expects to keep over time. For example, if a machine has a 6% house edge, it means that across millions of spins, the casino expects to retain roughly 6 cents of every dollar wagered. But this does not happen instantly. In the short term, anything can happen. A player might win far more than they lose. Another player might lose quickly. But as the number of spins increases, results begin to drift closer and closer to the programmed expectation. Statisticians sometimes describe this effect as regression toward the mean. Random outcomes gradually settle into predictable averages. And when that happens on a machine with a house edge, the predictable average favors the casino. This is why time matters so much. The longer someone plays, the more likely their results are to resemble the machine's long-term design. Short sessions versus long sessions. To understand this more clearly, imagine 2 different players. The first player sits down and spins the machine 7 times. The second player sits down and spins the machine 200 times. Which player is more likely to experience the mathematical pull of the house edge? The second player. 7 spins is simply not enough time for the probabilities to settle. Anything could happen during those spins. The player might win, they might lose, or they might break even. But after hundreds of spins, the influence of the house edge becomes much stronger. That's when losses begin to accumulate more predictably. And that is exactly the environment casinos rely on. Why casinos don't need you to lose fast. One of the biggest misunderstandings about casinos is the idea that machines are designed to take money quickly. In reality, most casinos prefer the opposite. They want players to stay. They want the experience to feel entertaining. They want occasional wins to keep sessions alive. If players lost everything instantly, they would leave. But if the experience feels balanced, small wins, near misses, occasional bonuses, players are more likely to continue spinning. Over time, the house edge quietly does its work. It doesn't need to act aggressively. It only needs enough spins to apply itself again and again, which is why session length is one of the most important variables in gambling outcomes. The hidden power of discipline. The difference between winning and control. This leads to an important distinction. Disciplined players are not necessarily winning more money. They are simply controlling their exposure. They understand that slot machines cannot be predicted. They understand that every spin is random. But they also understand that the longer they play, the closer their results drift toward the house edge. So instead of trying to defeat probability, they manage their interaction with it. They limit time, they limit spins, and they accept that some sessions will end without clear results. That acceptance is something many players struggle with, because gambling naturally encourages the idea that persistence will eventually produce a reward. But probability does not reward persistence.
It only applies its averages over time. Why the pattern matters. When casino employees notice players leaving after only a few spins, they are not witnessing a secret strategy. They are seeing discipline. And discipline disrupts the casino's preferred model of long sessions and repeated wagers. Not dramatically, not enough to threaten the system, but enough to stand out. Because most players behave very differently. They stay longer, they chase wins, they chase losses, and they allow the momentum of the environment to guide their decisions. The 7-spin rule, in contrast, forces a pause, a moment of reflection, a chance to step away before momentum becomes commitment.
The real lesson. In the end, the idea that casinos fear a specific number of spins is mostly a myth. The number itself doesn't matter. 7 spins does not unlock better odds. It does not trick the machine. It does not change the probability of the next outcome. What it does change is time. And in a system built around long-term mathematical expectation, time is the variable players can actually control. Understanding that difference changes the way many people view gambling. Instead of searching for the perfect machine or the perfect moment, they begin to see the system more clearly. A system where outcomes are random in the short term, but structured in the long term. And if you enjoy learning how casino systems really work, the psychology, the mathematics, and the design behind the games, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Give the video a like if this explanation helped you see slot machines in a new way. And share it with someone who believes there's a secret trick that guarantees win. Because the more you understand the system, the more control you have over how you play.